Hi, I'm Tiff. I was a line cook for 12 or 15 years, don't know anymore, and this is my favorite chef knife. I work at the Knifewear warehouse now, but once upon a time, I was a line cook. And, you know, when people ask what your favorite chef knife is, the answer is usually pretty similar. This little beauty is the Seki Kanetsugu Zuin 150 Petty. This is made out of SG2 powdered stainless steel, which is one of the reasons I really like it. It is super sharp out of the box. It stays really sharp as you use it, and it's stainless, which means it takes a lot of abuse compared to some of my other carbon steel knives. Another reason I like it is because it is spectacularly good looking. It's just like really fun to use, a very pretty tool. Reason number 3 that I love this knife is it has a super weird handle. The heptagonal handle fits really nicely in the grooves of my fingers. When I was working in kitchens, what I might have used this knife for is some of the same stuff that I use it for now. I would be trimming fat or removing silver skin. I worked with some fish, and so removing fish skin with a really thin, longer shaped, really nimble knife was really important to me. I never really liked using a fillet knife because I'm a weirdo. And probably because I didn't learn how to properly, if I'm gonna be 100% honest. But the petty knife was one of my best friends, continues to be, and I like this one for the reasons I've already said. So here are a couple of jobs that I use this knife for on the regular at home. Cutting cherry tomatoes for salads. This will go through like crazy. The biggest problem with me cutting cherry tomatoes is that I can't keep them out of my mouth. You know, like I like to half tomatoes a lot because I've got kids, and putting a whole round item in your kid's mouth is sometimes a terrible idea. But also it looks really nice, and it helps to release some of the beautiful cherry tomato juices. Another job I might use this knife for, as I said, is cutting up shallots for, you know, pretty much anything. Sauces. I did a whole bunch of them the other day for a curry paste. The Zuin knife, I've mentioned that I really like the Kuritsuke tip on it because you can just like really quickly get through onions or shallots or whatever that you need to. You can score like chicken breasts if you want to. Yeah, just like leave markings on it. It's nice for trimming things like mushrooms, you know, if you fancy. Another thing that I like this particular knife for is cutting meat. I love to serve meat cut for a lot of reasons at home. My kid is not a huge meat eater, and so if I put a whole steak on his plate, he's not gonna touch it. But if I put delicate little slices of a beautifully cooked pork chop on his steak, and by on his steak, maybe, but on his plate for sure, he'll eat that. And so this knife is really great for that. I mean, technically you could use a sujihiki, but I'm not pulling down my 270 to do a job that a 150 is already out to do. Look at that, oh my gosh. Mwah. Zuin 150, get one.
Hi, my name is Matt. I was a chef for 10 years, and this is my favorite chef's knife. So I worked in kitchens for about 10 years. I'd say predominantly, I spent a lot of time doing Mediterranean food. So there's a lot of really nice sort of peppers for a piperade. We're doing a lot of citrus, a lot of like bright flavors. And often that's like pretty tight knife work. A 210 Gyuto was like a really great size that was kind of all encompassing. I could do those larger bits of work. I could also kind of work with this in my hand. It might seem a little bigger than you need, but I guarantee you could still use a 210 chef's knife for work in the hand if push comes to shove. So the knife I actually chose is the Masakage Koishi Gyuto 210. It's this beautiful guy here. He makes some incredible knife lines, a few of them within the Masakage umbrella, as well as a whole bunch under his own Hamano. It has a carbon steel core, it's stainless steel cladding, really nice, simple, classic Japanese handle. I think this is cherry wood with black packer. It does everything you need it to. It's not too showy, but the performance on this thing is outrageous. If you've seen me talk about knives at all, I'm obsessed with stainless steel because I can't really look after carbon steel. This comes into being my dream knife because the dream is that one day I'll be able to look after carbon steel. One day I won't make my knives rust. My two kids, they will very much keep me on my toes, and my knives will keep on developing what I refer to politely as a heavy patina. But this is the knife that once I have a little bit more sort of time, a little bit less pressure to kind of be running around everywhere, and I can look after my knives, Koishi is a beautiful one to go for. So I've got a red pepper here. What I'm going to start with is taking the top off, taking the bottom off, and just giving myself a nice hollow to work with. So I can see straight through the pepper here. I've got a nice line of sight. I'm just going to slice down there, getting rid of my compost as we go. And start just gently opening this side here. So I'm going to tuck that in, unravel my pepper, and to paraphrase, look mum, no seeds. I'm going to start by breaking it into 3 pieces. The size of these depends on your own on your own comfort level. So you could break these down into bigger pieces, into smaller pieces, whatever makes you happy. The reason I'm doing this is I always liked a really fine julienne. It's great if you're doing like a Vietnamese chopped salad. It's great if you just want something to cook quickly, or even if you're just trying to get some nice quick pickles for like a banh mi. So I'm going to start by bringing this right to the end of my cutting board. I'm going to use my bear claw grip to push it flat, and I'm going to start slicing what I'm calling filleting the pepper. So basically I'm working parallel to the board to take off the flesh here and have a thinner piece with the skin. I can then kind of reconnect the two, and I'm going to go into a classic julienne. So for this, you end up with a really consistent, even sort of cut, whereas before, because a pepper is it's a natural vegetable, you're going to get some bigger pieces, some smaller. This way, I end up with a really clean, even sort of julienne. The next knife skill I'm going to talk about is segmenting an orange. Now, part of this comes from doing some desserts and having like fresh citrus going with like a arroz con leche, which is like a Spanish rice pudding dish. We'd always do that with candied orange and lemons. It was really, really nice. I have found since I left kitchens that I find myself doing this more for my children now than I do for professional use. Because if you want to get somebody to eat some orange, taking all of the pith off it and just being left with that segment is a great way, if not time consuming. But it's a lot of fun, so I'm going to show you how to do that. It'll also show you that you can work with a 210mm Guto in your hand pretty comfortably. So similar to the pepper, I'm going to start by just topping and tailing the orange. The one caveat to this is that I want to make sure that I can see all of my segments before I start peeling it. If you've still got some pith covering the top, just take another fine slice. But in this case, I did a pretty nice job, so I don't need to. I'm then going to bring the orange back to the edge of my board, and I'm going to start cutting and pivoting the knife as I go. So what I'm doing is I'm just curving around, so I get these nice thick pieces of orange zest. You can keep them; they're great for sort of baking with. You can. One fun thing to do is actually squeeze it backwards, get the oils out for a cocktail. But so I'm going to just take the skin off the orange the whole way around. I'm making the same cut and turning the orange rather than trying to maneuver my knife each time. So this way I get a nice smooth finish. I can flip the orange over in a second and go back and do the other side. So I'm not worried too much about the little bits that are hanging over. And once I've got my rough shape, I've got my orange here, just flip it over, take off the last of the zest. So now I've got my orange, I've got most of the zest off. I've got enough that I can see each segment really clearly. I've got a little deli cup, or if you're doing it at home, you can use a bowl, whatever you've got. But work over something to store both the segments and the juice, because there's going to be some juice dropping as you go. What I'm doing here is I'm going to work with the knife going into one segment, just to one side of the pith, and then I'm going to slice on the other side till that kind of matches up. And you end up with this really beautiful little orange segment that's just hanging out, and that can drop down into the bowl. And all I'm going to do is basically do that exact same thing, working around the orange. This knife is really good for this task because it's a big knife. You can do clean, long slices like this without having to put too much pressure down, whilst also kind of maintaining really good control. You can see I'm pinching it quite far up on the blade, but if you wanted to hold it back on the handle, you could. I'd always just recommend go with what you're comfortable with. But all I'm kind of doing is letting the knife do the work compared to me having to put any pressure down. I always feel that's the safest way if you're working in your hands. You don't want to be putting a lot of pressure towards something. So if you can just let the sharpness of the knife do all the work for you, then that's going to make your life way easier. And you end up with little orange starfruit and a bunch of completely pithless orange segments. And they are super juicy and delicious. Once you've taken all the segments off, you can cut and you end up with these fun little orange stars. You can dehydrate them, you can float them on top of an old fashioned, you can use them to sort of spike over a piece of pork, so as it glazes down, that little juice is going to dribble into it. Or you can do what I do most of the time, which is squeeze juice over your oranges.
Hi, my name's Mike. I was a chef for 16 years, and this is my dream chef's knife. So I'm gonna start by cutting the top and the bottom off, and when I have a long knife, I've got the range to slide. If I had a short knife, it's not gonna slide as nicely as I want it to. Now I'm gonna peel this much like you would peel any sort of round fruit or vegetable. I'm gonna go in behind the white part of the skin and move the knife with the curve. And then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna follow around and I'm just gonna peel the skin off. The long knife, I'm kind of doing it in one smooth sliding motion. If I had a shorter knife, I would have to do more back and forth. So like right now, I'm gonna dice this watermelon because it seems like the logical thing to do. And you see, like this is a big fruit, is a big object, and the weight, the length, the size of the knife, it just drops right through. I don't really need to fuss. It does make it really easy. I'm not having to do weird things to negotiate the knife so it will do the work. And frankly, I think that's a lot safer. You can cut forwards or backwards, whichever you want. Just dropping your hand as you start that sliding motion. And what I mean is, like, if I'm gonna cut something, I start by just sliding the knife forwards, and that slide will create the incision, and then you just have to drop your hand. So with a big knife, you can definitely do big, coarse cuts, like just a big dice, chopping up onions or potatoes or whatever, right? You can also do some finer cuts. Something like Swiss chard's a really great vegetable, and it is quite big. You can always just tear it up to eat it, but you can also do some nicer things with it, like a chiffonade. Basically, I'm gonna take these flat leaves, and this is a technique I'll show you with some herbs, but I'm gonna take these flat leaves and stack them, and then I'm gonna roll them back on itself. I like to make one sort of a horizontal incision, and now I'll cut them into these nice strips, which will give me something nice to saute. It'll end up being nice and even, if that's what you're going for. Often even cuts cook more evenly, so you get a more consistent result. But a chiffonade is a nice technique to use, and a big knife is going to make that easy, especially when you're dealing with like big leafy greens, which, you know, all of our cardiologists want us to eat more of, I guess. You can also do that chiffonade technique with something that's like a fresh herb. We got some fresh sage here, but big fat fresh parsley leaves or mint or basil, you can also use that same chiffonade technique. You just pick some leaves off here. Herbs like this can have a lot of flavor, and maybe you just want it spread out evenly throughout the food, not a big dominant flavor. So chiffonade gives you a nice fine cut and allows that flavor to distribute nice and evenly and not be overpowering. So again, I'm just gonna put a little sort of horizontal incision on the side here. And then I can just roll back and forth. And you see this big knife really allows me to slide the knife. And that's so much better than pushing. When you crush herbs like this, they oxidize immediately, and sooner than later they get black and they smell like you've run them through a lawnmower, and they just taste bad. A lot of times people will have a santoku, a knife like this. It's really manageable. It's kind of the 6 inches, or for us usually 185 or 165 millimeters, and that size does so much work in your house. But you get to something big like a squash, you go to push into it, that's it, you're done. You got to start again, right? The knife gets stuck. With a shorter knife like this, I pushed into it, the knife is stuck, that's it. I got to come back at it, roll it around. You got to start doing stuff to make it work. and you can always make a knife do a lot of different jobs, but we're talking about better. And what makes this job better is a bigger, longer knife. Bye. A bigger, longer knife will make that job a lot easier, and you know, maybe that's what you're looking for. When I'll cut a squash, I want to cut the top and the bottom off so I can expose that open core. Especially if you're dealing with something really big and heavy, I'm not going to try and cut it in half all the way across. I'll do one side of it and then another side of it so I can focus the pressure on a smaller area and then scoop the seeds out. Now you can break the rest of the thing down into more manageable chunks and you can work at peeling it off just like you did the watermelon. Again, just makes it easy. The long blade, the length, the weight of the handle, everything about this knife I find really appealing just for being a trusty workhorse of a knife. You can go around, you can do all kinds of different things with it. It does make a lot of big, heavier jobs a lot easier. It makes bulk work a lot easier. It just makes things easier. That's why I really like this knife. Thanks for watching. If you want to see the three of us talk about other knives we like, watch this video. Otherwise, thanks for watching. All these knives are available at knifewear.com. We hope to see you soon. Bye.